All right. Looks like we got our focus working. So this film is about notes on layouts, but I want to give you a little background here. So I'm working on a project right now that I think is really good. And for those of you who know me, that is not something I would typically ever say. I would never tell someone, my project is great. I think my project is really great. What I'm talking about is the actual concept of the project itself. The story, the idea, the concept, one written part, two photographic parts. The written part and the photographic part, the actual work that I create from this project, I don't know if it's going to be good. I've been working on it for 2 years. I've kind of scratched the surface. I'm not even sure how long it would take me to finish, even if I had nothing else to do. I typically only get a couple of times a year to work on it. It's a bit frustrating. I would love to have more time to go out and really focus and try to concentrate. But I do think that the concept and the story is really good. So I'm just beginning to lay out some pages. And the problem I have is this. I work for Blurb, and Blurb, as you know, offers a variety of softwares, right? We make a plugin for InDesign, we make our Bookwright software, we have PDF Uploader, you can make a book through Lightroom. I know with certainty I am not good enough at design to really make this project what it should be. So at some point down the line, I'm going to hire a designer and have them design this because I know it will be exponentially better than what I can do. But in the interim, I need to design something myself because the vast majority of people who are going to use the platform, who are looking at what I'm doing and saying, hey, I want to try to do that same thing, they don't have the means to hire a designer. They might not have the connections, or they may not even have the desire to do that. They want to do everything by themselves. So I'm going to design a version of this that will go into print form through Blurb, whether that be a print-on-demand version or maybe even an offset version. If I can get a very, very small 500 books or less offset run, even digitally, I would do that. If I could get 100 copies of this book, I think I'd be happy. But I want to just take a look at some layouts. I've just started to mock some things up. What I'm going to show you is not my project. What I'm going to show you is just a random image I chose, and then I mocked up some spreads based on that image just to play around to kind of get a feel of where I might be going with this actual ongoing project that I have. So let's take a little look, just a quick look at 3 layouts, 2 of which I think are somewhat of a disaster. 1 shows a little bit of promise, and let's go over those in detail. Well, hello everyone. Did you miss me from the time I left my kitchen table to walk into my office? I hope so. Listen, I just completely rearranged my office on Sunday. If you haven't done this in a while, this is a sort of unrelated hot tip. Totally remodel your office because it almost feels like you're getting a new job. It's a new lease on life. For all of us who are normally on the road, who have been at home for the last 9 months, spending copious time in our offices, it's actually a really good thing. Plus, it makes it easier to go through and clean and also get rid of the stuff that we've accumulated that we don't need. So let's talk a little bit about these layouts. As I mentioned before, I have no intention of printing what I'm about to show you. These were images I pulled off of a hard drive randomly to just throw them into spreads to start laying some things out to see whether or not these would work with my ongoing project. Now, these were images I made in Del Mar, California, which is just north of San Diego. It's a very famous horse racing track, and I don't remember how this came about, but I somehow got access to what's called the backstretch. And the backstretch, especially before it's open, is this very interesting place with this primarily horse owners and trainers working with the animals while there's not races going on. And it's a very temperamental location because these horses are high performance machines and they're skittish, and you have to be very careful about how you're working, where you go. If you spooked someone's horse and something happened, you're talking about horses that are worth millions of dollars. So it's not the easiest place in the world to work. I had a Fuji 6x9 camera, which the nickname of that camera was the double truck machine because it was such a perfect device for shooting magazine work. Amazing camera, but that's how I made these pictures and went. I got 1 day of access to this location, nothing more, made some pictures and moved on. So again, 2 of the 3 spreads I'm going to show you I think are rightly terrible, but there are aspects of them that I kind of like that I think the 3rd one is the most promising. So I'm in the Blurb Bookwright software right now. Nothing fancy. I have document after document created in this software that I'm, again, never going to print, but I just have different spreads. So I'm going to go up to the preview button up here so that it cleans up the spread a little bit. And then I'll increase the size a bit so we're easier to see. So the one thing, well, I guess there's more than one thing I like about this spread. This spread is way too busy. It's way too fractured. There's too much going on. The reader, if you were to turn the page and look at this spread, you would have no idea where to look. That's never good. Naturally, the human eye goes to the upper right-hand corner of any spread. So if this knockout quote was my single most important part of the spread, then I would say, okay, well, maybe I'm warm. I'm getting warm. It's not. The single most important part of the spread is this image right here. Behold the pony, the title telling you that you're at a horse racing track. People refer to that as racing the ponies. The knockout quote is not that important. It's certainly not going to supersede this actual image. So I don't like the design. I don't like how fractured this looks. I don't like this giant piece of trapped white space in the middle. The knockout quote is too big. The type's not justified. I don't like the font that I'm using or the typeface that I'm using. Let me tell you what I do like. I like the big, bold use of a single image across the gutter editorial style. I do like that. I also like this typeface right here, which is called Vor. See, I'm choking up. It's so good. I'm just about to cry. I also like this type reversed out over the body copy. Now, normally this would be actual copy, but as you can see, it's just gobbledygook right now. But I do like the grayed out half-density pony over the top of it. I don't care if it lessens the legibility of the copy underneath. I will gladly trade a design element for legibility to a certain degree. Okay, also, I like what I did a little bit with this caption here, which is I'm using a bold font mixed with a non-bold font, so there's a separation there. And what you're talking about in typography when you do something like that is you're talking about hierarchy of typography. So once the viewer sees the caption designed this way, they know that every time they see a spread moving forward, your brain defaults to the fact that you've already seen this type hierarchy, and you know that you're looking at caption information. So it could be an image title in bold with a description or location in non-bold, and so or normal font. So that's called type hierarchy. So again, this spread is way too busy, but I'm pulling aspects of it that I think are not bad that I can try next. Okay, now this is another disaster. This spread is not good. I see a lot of people attempting to make books with black backgrounds, and I think this is very difficult to pull off. Of all the books I have in my collection, I have somewhere less than 5 that have black pages. And the material with black pages tends to be very heavy. I have a book about insane asylums in Greece that has black pages. It's not like light and bright. Horse racing to me is not, it's in the middle. It's not a dark subject. It's not a light subject. It is controversial because some people think it's like cruel to the animals, whatever. I don't think this black works at all. The only positive aspect of the black is that it sets off these images that have light borders to them are banded in tightly by that black background, which is okay, but these are dark enough that I don't need that. Even if I had a white background, these images are not going to bleed into the white background, so I don't need black. Black feels too heavy. Again, I love this photograph. I love the dark, foreboding nature of the horse. I love the coiled hose, and I love the contrasting white soap suds. I think that's a solid image, but it's getting lost because there's too much action happening here. There's too many images, and I'm not using them particularly well. Nothing is offsetting and grabbing the viewer's attention. Also, the knockout quote is way too large. I don't mind running it over the body of the horse, but the copy's too large. I don't like the font. I don't like how the type is treated. And the Behold the Pony title gets lost. And then I've got this giant empty space down here, which is kind of boring to me. 2-column text treatment is totally fine. But again, this spread just doesn't work. This looks like I just threw a bunch of stuff against the wall. Let's move on to the last and final, and I think we're headed in the right direction here. Let me explain why I think this is a solid spread, and you might be able to take something beneficial from this. Number one is I have eliminated most other images except for the primary image. It is impossible for you to see anything else besides this main photograph. When you turn this spread, boom, 100% of the viewer attention is here. I also like the fact that I've done a two-way bleed with the image, meaning it's bleeding off two sides of the spread, but there's a border across the bottom. I really like that. The single copy block here, which is very easy to read, very simple, is also justified down here and aligned with the bottom of the photograph. The type I love. Vur, I think, is a really nice typeface. I'm liking it for this. I like the serif font. It adds a little bit of, in my opinion, a little sophistication. I like how the first three letters are over the image itself. And again, I'll trade legibility for a design element any day of the week. There is a little bit of trapped white space here. I could have moved the V over to the left a bit and justified it here and aligned it with the P, but I don't mind it that much. I would probably go back and forth and look at that 100 times before I made my final decision. I've got my photographs by and my name here in the center, and the hierarchy with that typography is I've italicized that to let it separate it from the body copy and the title. This image here at the top, let me scroll in a bit. Let me zoom in here a bit. That image is basically it's a placeholder. It's a design element. It's too small for you to actually really see what it is. And what it is the ground of the backstretch, which is a very unique piece of earth. This is not just dirt. This is a special material that they use so that the horses don't get injured while running. It's safe for their hooves. And it's kind of like this weird cross between dirt, sand, and cardboard. I don't know how else to describe it. And it's deep, and it gets marked up like this. But it's too small to read here. Even if I ran it four-way, double truck bleed, you'd still probably have to take a real good look at it to see it. So the one last thing I did here, let me just scroll, make it a little smaller, is down here I've got my image title. It's called Morning Washdown, Backstretch Del Mar. So I've also used that same sort of type hierarchy here, whereas I have, this is in italics, but the image title itself is all caps, so it sets itself apart. Now, if I was going to do captions in the rest of the book, they would all maintain that exact look and feel. You want consistency. You want things like alignment. You want readability with your body copy. You want, again, type hierarchy where you're setting off saying, okay, all of the titles and subtitles will be in italic. You've chosen a font that you think fits the style of imagery and the style of publication that you are trying to put out. And then one little final design element here, which is this would have been, if this was blank, it would have still been doable, but I think it really needed something to anchor that top corner because, again, remember, when someone opens a magazine or a book, the first place they look is right here. So I didn't want to distract, but I also didn't just want a blank spot. So I think overall, when I'm looking at designing a spread, those are some of the things that I'm trying to keep in mind to try to make things as refined as possible, but also not lose track of the original message I am saying, which is, I think this is a good photograph, and I want you to take your time and study this. So I hope that was helpful looking at spreads. I'm going to be doing this on a regular basis. And again, I think this is a valuable thing, at least in my mind, because I have zero training in page layout, page design, book design, etc. In my entire photojournalism education career, which was about 5 years of full-time photojournalism study, I had exactly one design class, and this was pre-computer digitization of the process. So we used T-squares and tracing paper to do design. So it was painfully slow. I did learn some things in that class, but that was, 30 years ago, and that's the only class I've ever had. So if I learned to do this just by practice and by making mistakes and printing books that I looked at and said, this is not good enough, and also hanging around with people who are full-time book designers and learning from them and studying. Things like typography in itself are a language to itself. Page design is a language to itself. So even though you might be a good photographer, this may not be a skill set that you have, and you have to learn and you have to practice. The good news, it's a lot of fun. And when you have success and you make progress on page layout and design, it feels rewarding because we all are wrapped up in our photography, right? We want it to look as good as possible. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will be back with more. Yes, I'm back. Was that heartbreaking, heart-rendering, heartwarming? I don't know. These layouts and playing around with layouts, as I mentioned before, this is something I do all the time. The vast majority of these things I'm not going to print. I'm just experimenting so that when it comes time to actually print something, I've worked out my overall design, my system a little better than what I had before. So hopefully that was helpful, and I'll be back with more.